Well, welcome to what I think is lecture 7, maybe 8 of the Kuzari. We are doing what's called the first essay, or the Ma'amar Rishon of the Kuzari, and the last paragraph we read was paragraph number 73. So we're about to read paragraph number 74. Just a quick reminder, 74, it starts in the middle of something. So I'll remind you what we were in the middle of. And is everybody able to hear me well? I don't know. I just brought the microphone closer to my mouth, so hopefully it's a little better. Okay, good. So the Chaver, or the rabbi, depending on how you want to translate it, is having a conversation now with the Kuzari, the king of the Chazars, and the Kuzari had kind of went off on a little tangent. He said, okay, let's leave alone for a minute all these philosophical questions, and I want to focus on the idea of how it is that God can communicate with human beings. If God is a being that is beyond our comprehension, so much far removed and above us, and we're such lowly material creatures, how is it possible that God could communicate with human beings? In other words, how could there be such a thing as prophecy? So we're in the middle of that conversation, and the Chaver started answering him with by saying, "Oh, that's an easy one, right?" And then he proceeded, "I'll do this one quickly," which ended up not being so quick. He answered him at first by asking a typical question, a Jewish way of answering a question with a question, and he said to him, what is it that causes things to be the way they are, that causes creation to be the way it is? And the Kuzari says this is the actions of nature. Teva is nature. So the Chaver then asked him, so what's nature? And then the Kuzari answered in number 72. He said, it's some strength, it's some power. I don't know exactly what is nature, but whatever it is, it's something that the philosophers all know about, and they know really well, so you could just ask them. And then the Chaver said, not really. If they know just as much as we know as to what the nature of Teva is, what the nature of nature is. And that's where we were up to. That's where we left this conversation. And we're about to continue this conversation with item number 74. So in 73, I'm sorry, let me turn back in both versions that I have here. In 73, the Chaver said to the Kuzari, he said to him an Aristotelian concept, which I'm going to explain a little bit more in detail. Let me read 73 again, because I don't remember how much of it I did at the end of last lecture. So Amar Chaver, the rabbi answers the Kuzari as follows. Lo, this is not true. And remember, when I'm reading from the Hebrew in the translation of Michael Schwartz, which is this version. It's a modern Hebrew translation direct from the Arabic. Most of you will probably have the Korobkin version, which is this one, which is an English translation, a very nicely done job, but it's an English translation from the Hebrew Ibn Tibbon translation, which was the original Hebrew. So it's kind of a translation of a translation. But either way, those are the versions that I have in front of me open right now. So what the Kuzari answered, it's not true that the philosophers know all about nature and what nature is. They know just as much as we know about nature. In other words, we both observe the world around us, and we both say, this is the nature of this and this thing. A rock falls, a bird flies, the sky is blue, whatever. We look around, we see things in nature, and we know what they are. But what makes them what they are, the philosoph higdiro so, but the philosophers, meaning the Aristotelian philosophers in this case, they divided it into categories and explained that there's two different types of things. And here's where I'm going to come outside a little and explain. In Aristotle's thought, there's two types of qualities that any natural item can have. There are things that are intrinsic qualities, and there are things that are incidental qualities. So incidental, we had this when we studied Rambam together as well. And incidental means mikra, means a chance. It means a characteristic of something which isn't intrinsic to making that thing what it is. So, for example, a a human being, for example, has a quality that he or she, has all of these things that make us feel things, see things, smell things, talk about things, think about things, etc. But then I could decide to go and learn how to be a physician, right? So that doesn't define me as to whether or not I'm a human being, right? That means that I'm a human being that learned a certain skill by going through a certain process of learning. So one, the intrinsic things are the things that make me human, right? The incidental things are the things that come from the outside, that are qualities about me, but they're not things that define me as a human being. So it would be similar if you said that let's say wood has certain qualities, right? But that those are intrinsic qualities that make wood wood. Now, but incidentally, you can take that wood and make a table out of it. So the incidental quality of the table in front of us is A, that it's wood, which is an intrinsic quality, and B, that it's a table, which is an incidental quality, something that this particular piece of wood happens to have the form and shape of a table. So he's saying that the philosophers divided into the things that are the ikaron and the siba shebeglolo hadvar mamtsuim betnua. So there are certain things that intrinsically make certain things move in a certain way. So the nature of the stars, for example, is such that they move in a certain way. Now, remember, obviously, they had a geocentric universe where the stars were constantly rotating around Earth. So why do the stars move? Because that's the intrinsic nature of the star to move. So the Kuzari, so they have all these nice explanations, but ultimately, why is it that the star has the qualities, that the intrinsic qualities that make a star a star? They don't know, right? It would be similar in a way to asking the question today, right? I can explain to you a physical phenomenon by giving you the laws of physics that dictate that this phenomenon should happen the way it does, right? I can tell you that the strength of gravity on Earth is, I don't remember the number, some of you might remember, whatever it is, so that it causes an acceleration when you drop something from a roof, that it should fall down at a certain speed. That's a law of physics that I can recite, and it will predict pretty accurately when I drop something how quickly it will fall. Of course, if you calculate into it all the other physical characteristics, the friction, et cetera, fine. However, I can't tell you why that's the law of physics. Now, I might be able to go deeper and say, okay, well, the mass of the Earth is such and such, and therefore the Earth is made out of such, so therefore it has a certain a strength of gravity. So I go take it a step deeper, but I still can't tell you why is it that this particular calculation of mass affects gravity. The deeper I go into it, the more I explain. And obviously nowadays we've went far beyond Newton in explaining these things. You still end up at some point with the law of physics, which we don't know why that law is the way it is. So I'm trying to take his words and translate them in kind of modern terms, and with all the inherent dangers therein, but I'm doing it anyway. So Amar Kuzari, so the Kuzari says to him, to the Chaver, to the rabbi, in item 74, Kamohu, similar to this, Ka'omer, it is like someone who says, Shadavar hana me'atzmo v'yanuach me'atzmo, yesh lo siba shebiglalahu navanach v'siba zo siateva. It's like saying that something that moves in a certain way on its own, like we see the stars do, right? Or something that decides stop moving on its own, like if you throw a rock at some point, it'll just land and stop, right? It has some reason why it starts and stops. And that reason, whatever that reason is, whatever law of nature it is that dictates that, that's teva, that's nature. Okay. So the Chaver says, Lazosu miskavein. That is what Aristotle is intent, but that's what he means when he says that things have an intrinsic nature. And he goes and he talks about it and he studies it and he analyzes it and he comes up with all kinds of laws and rules and so on and so forth. Between things that happen because it's the nature of the thing and things that happen because something else acted upon that. So, mikra, things that are not that are incidental. And he says these things which strongly influence all of those that listen, all of those that study. The scientists, they get all these rules and laws of physics and equations that dictate all these behaviors, not behaviors, all these actions and qualities of different things. But in the end of the story, they still rely on the fact that nature dictates these things, right? So no matter how many laws you get, in the end, you're still left with, well, why is it that things function this way? You're always left with the question in the end of why, right? Or why and what, or both, or whatever. What exactly is it that makes it that this is the law, that this is how nature works? What is that force? What is that overall thing that makes it this way? So Amar HaKuzari, so the Kuzari said, Nirali, it seems to me, and Rabbi Yehuda Levi, it cleverly makes the Kuzari, the king of the Chazars, come to this realization, which the rabbi is trying to drive him to make, which is, it seems to me, they use all of these names and laws of what Aristotelian physics to explain the phenomenon of nature, right? With all of these names, and they're switching it, because you could easily have used the term and said that God made nature this way, that there's a force called God which decided that this is how nature works, and he's the ultimate force behind it all, right? But they just call it nature, right? We say that it's nature that is the wise one. It's nature that decides these things, when it's really not nature that decided it. Ultimately, the ultimate law of physics was when God created the world, he created the world with these laws, with whatever wisdom he had, that he decided that these should be the laws by which the universe exists. V'yeshanu omrim bore al pi mashmos devreim. Right? We could just as easily have called it the creator. Rabbi Yehuda Levi is saying a fascinating idea here, which is really important and one that we should really think about deeply. And that is that very often when people say the term, very often you'll find people who claim to be atheists, right? And they'll say that, that the world works the way it works because that's how it works, right? It's nature that makes it works that way, right? But ultimately, in many cases, and then they'll deny a God as a creator, right? But the bottom line is that sometimes they're really saying the same thing. They're just using a different language. If you understand that God is the wisdom behind the creation of the laws of nature, so we can discover and learn and study the laws, and we can come to all kinds of understandings and realizations of what these laws of nature are. But ultimately, the bottom line is that the creator was the one who made those laws. He created the world with the laws to work that way. So sometimes, not always, and we're going to see some nuances in a minute, sometimes when a person says nature, they could just as easily mean God. So he just got the Kuzar, the king of the Kuzarim, to recognize that there is a force called God. He just used to use a different name for it. Okay, I see a hand up. So Jeff, fire away.
Yeah, I know gematria may not be a convincing argument, but am I correct that the gematria for nature and for Hashem is the same? Isn't that correct?
Well, assuming the word for nature is teva, so that's 70, 81. I don't know how that works, unless there's another word for nature that you're thinking of. There's another problem with that, is that the word of teva, which is the modern Hebrew term of nature, and it was used for centuries, does not appear in Tanakh. It's a more recent term.
Okay. Well, I've heard that. So, and what's the gematria for Yud Hey and Vov Kei?
It's 26.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
So, there may be another word that you're thinking about that's
Okay.
possible.
Okay.
But either way, so what he's telling him at first, so remember, he's trying to answer him and explain how is it that God can converse with human beings. So he just nailed the first, he just stated the first step in the logic that he's going to use to answer this question. Remember, it's kind of funny that he said he's going to answer it quickly, but it's going to be pretty long, his answer. But the first step is to recognize that God is interacting with nature, all with us all the time, right? Through what? Through the laws of nature, right? Everything that we're doing all day. So yes, it's true that God is above and beyond our understanding to a degree which we can't even describe. However, on the other hand, we all should admit that some force, something that's making the universe go round, or if the universe isn't round, whatever, it's making the universe do whatever the universe is doing, right? And whatever that force is, right? It's communicating with us, so to speak, because it's what makes everything happen. It's what makes me talk tonight. It's what making our computers work and our doorbells ring. It's what's making it all happen. So he just got the Kuzari to recognize a fundamental communication between God and his universe. But he's not finished yet, right? So, but it's still not prophecy. It's still not me and you having some sort of communication with the mind of God or the will or desire of God, so to speak. It just has us experiencing the things that he's making happen. So we have to get there. So he's going to go on. So Amar Chaver. So now that the Kuzari came to this realization in item number 77, which is on page 89 in the Korubkin version that I showed you guys before, that I think most of you have. So the Chaver says like this. So you recognize, right? In other words, so you Kuzari recognize that you can call it nature or you can call it God. But you recognize that we as Jews believe that we should call it God, not nature, because we believe in God. We're a religion. So the Chaver said, but there however, yisodos, but there are the basic elements, right? The basic and here he doesn't mean elements like you and I understand elements like of the periodic table. He means the basic structures that we see in the universe around us, Hayarech, the moon, Hashemesh, the sun, Kochavim, and the stars, Poalim, they act in certain ways, right? They have certain qualities, but they're Chachimum, they have a certain heat, Tatzinun, a certain coolness, Hartava, a certain moisture, Hayibush, a certain dryness, and so on. There's certain qualities that all of these bodies have. In other words, everything around us has certain qualities. The key point here is that these have these qualities, but they don't have a sentient intelligence which tells them how to have these qualities, how to use these qualities, how to do things with these qualities, right? In other words, the star gives a certain amount of light, gives a certain amount of heat, gives a certain amount of gravity, gives a certain amount, whatever it is that the star does, it does because of an inherent nature qualities that star has, and which would be the same thing with everything that exists in this world. So anything that happens through nature alone happens without any sentient intelligence thinking, okay, now I'm going to be this, or now I'm going to be. The star can't wake up one morning and say, okay, now I'm going to be a moon, right? It's not. It's a star, right? So so they're forced to be in that situation. As matanatsuros, kvias amidos vashiurim. So the measurements and the and the size and the form, right? El hapoel. The fact that they bring these certain things into action and into being. V'chol ma sheyesh bo chachma sheyesh la matara. Okay. So those are those things. Those are inherent to nature, right? However, anything that has wisdom, in other words, that has an intelligence that is thinking with his or her own free will, and I use the term free will. He doesn't use that term. But that has a specific goal in mind. So if I decide, okay, today I'm going to make a table because I want a table, or today I'm going to do a good deed, or I'm going to do a bad deed. These are things that I decide to do. That only a wise person, someone who thinks, someone who has wisdom can do. Bal Yecholes, a person who has the ability, Hakovea midos v'shiyurim, who can intrinsically figure out what the measurements are and what the amounts are. Mikan shemisha kori le'ele hamitaknim et hachomer al yidei chima motzinan b'shem teva enu mazik. So therefore, basically, if somebody wants to call the forces that guide the star to be a star, and he wants to say that that's nature, he's not calling it God, he's calling it nature. That's not a problem, right? But it depends. As long as he understands that that star doesn't have any decision-making capacity. The star does star things because that's what stars do, right? But it can't all of a sudden one day decide not to do star things, right? So but which is in a similar way, he says, and he's about to mention the comparison to a human couple. You have a man and a woman. They decide to get married. They decide to sleep together, have intercourse, and produce a child, right? So those are decisions, those are actions that those two people decided to make and do, right? So there was some wisdom. However, how is it that the child then implants in the uterus, it gets fertilized, implants in the uterus, develops into a baby, gets born, etc.? Those things are nature, right? Those things are not something that any sentient being decides, okay, this is what I'm going to do. It happens because of the intrinsic nature of the human being, right? So you can't say that they're the ones who created the child, right? Kashem Mitzdarfim, when they get together to sleep together to have a child, they are doing actions that assist nature to do the natural things to do, the kinds of actions which eventually result to Makabalas to Asadim, that matter will be created that will become eventually a human being. The Elutz Hatsura, but the form of the human, he me'etzel nosen Hatsura Sachacham, right? That is something that it's not something that they wisely decided they're going to do, and therefore they made it happen, right? Right? So don't think, right, that there are so you shouldn't think that there aren't divine influences. Clearly there are divine influences. What is it that decided that when this and this happens, a child results, right? Those laws of nature are being dictated and governed by a God who decided that this should be the end result. As soon as the actions are taken which now allow this chomer, this substance, to start taking form, the conditions are proper, the form will happen on its own, but not really on its own. This becomes the root for both understanding what Emunah is, what our faith is, right? And it's also the root of understanding how heresy can come about. So and he's going to explain in a minute. So the number 78, Amar Kuzari, Ein Shor Shamuna, Ech Shor Shamuno Shor Shemeri. How's it possible that this same idea, this concept, can lead both in the right direction and in the wrong direction? Which he's going to answer in a minute. But let me just remind us where we're up to now. So in this argument, right, our discussion, the Chaver has now established, right, that we can decide to do things, right? We can decide to make things happen. We have intelligence, sentience in order to make these decisions. But ultimately, the things that happen based on what you can call, if you want to, the laws of nature, right? And that would be okay if you call them the laws of nature. Those things happen without a chachma, without an outside intelligence, without an outside sentience telling this nature to go on that course. There's something else that makes that happen. And the Kuzari is telling us in the Jewish religion, that's God. Okay. So now you have a very clear path for God being very involved in all of the things that we do in our lives. So now so now that we understand that, so let's look at number 79. So how is it possible that one could take the same idea and go both in the path of faith, of proper faith, and in the path of heresy? How does this work? So Omar Hechaver, So the Chaver says, Kainhu, it's definitely possible for the same idea to lead in both directions. Hadvarim hamachshirim lekabolas haroshim ha'eloki, right? The kinds of things, I'm reading 79 now. Those the kinds of things which create a favorable environment, right, for someone to understand, right, uh, and for someone to receive the divine influence. Einam behesegam shel basar v'dam. Those are not the kinds of things. Okay, so he's going directly now onto the idea of prophecy and how prophecy works and how it's possible for us to tap in to this divine. So in other words, he said up until now, up until 78, his discussion was about nature, right? His discussion was about how the natural world works and how God interacts with it. Now he's finally about to come to the answer. Well, then how is it that God can communicate with a human being? How could a human being then get into that sentience, that the sentience as a reference to God's wisdom? How can you tap into God's wisdom and receive what's ultimately could be prophecy? So he says, so human beings don't know, cannot on their own. Okay. Now here is where he diverges greatly from Rambam and Rambam's understanding of prophecy. Those of us that studied with me more Nevuchim will see this right away. And those of us that haven't should go back and listen to the 138 lectures and study it. But or open up a more Nevuchim yourselves. But either way, here, if you remember, Rambam understood that one gains prophecy through intellectual endeavor, through ethical, moral, working on yourself, becoming a good person, getting rid of all selfish desires from your brain, and then with pure intellect and search for truth, eventually you become worthy of prophecy. And then if God decides for you to get prophecy, you'll get it. Whereas the Kuzari is looking at it in a much more top-down approach as opposed to a bottom-up approach. And the Kuzari is going to say that in order for us to now tap into that so-called, what I'm calling the sentience of God, so to speak, and I say sentience with trepidation. I don't really mean that God thinks like we do, but in order to tap into it, we have to prepare ourselves in a certain way in order to receive that, in order to know it. And what's that way? And he's going to say this in his own words in a minute. That way is through the Torah, right? So if we perfect ourselves through the Torah, then we can learn and see how. So this is the way in which the concept that I just told you before can lead to holiness, can lead to faith, right? So we cannot understand on our own how to tap into divine wisdom. We don't have the key. We don't know how. There's no way, because we exist in this world, right? However, but if we know the details of this path, Einhim Yodim es Maneam, we don't know when to do it, or Mukomosam, or the places to do it, as Nisposam, as how to prepare ourselves for it, how to prepare our bodies, how to prepare our things. Lizos Terusha Chachma Lokis Mushlemis. For this, we need a godly wisdom to come and tell us this is how you prepare yourself in order to receive God's prophecies, God's wisdom, right? In a clear way, right, that comes from God. If a person then does hear these commandments, he hears from God these rules, these laws, and he listens to them with pure intent, pure unselfish intent, a person devotes himself to studying, learning, and living the rules that God gives him, then hu hamamin, that is a person of faith. And that person can then achieve like a communion with this divine wisdom that is found throughout the world around us. However, if a person tries to achieve this through looking around at the world around him, shikaladas, through comparisons and scientific analysis, usvaros and logic, hamofios specific astrologim, which we find in the books of all the astrologers, and nowadays astrology, that's kind of an insult. Then he didn't mean it that way. The astrologers were the scientists who were investigating the stars and the moon and so on. Kigon horodas haruchnias vasias kameos, and then they try to use all of these ways by try to bring down spirituality in all kinds of other ways through amulets. Hu hamamra, that is a person who is rebellious. So if you follow the path of Torah in order to receive this knowledge from God, then you're on the path of a faithful person. If you decide, oh, I'm going to try to tap into that spiritual wisdom through any other path, then you are going down the path of a rebellious person, a person who is a heretic. Kihu makriv karbanos umaktimini ketoras. You're going to burn all kinds of incense and bring all kinds of sacrifices. Al pi hekesh, al pi sforos, through all kinds of ideas. But he doesn't know properly what's right. Now, remember, going back all the way to the beginning of the Sefer Kuzari, he's directly addressing what the Kuzari himself was trying to do. He was trying to find God by doing all kinds of things, by bringing sacrifices and doing all kinds of rituals, trying to find the right path. So the Chacham, the rabbi, is now telling him, you were following the wrong path, because had you been following the path that the Torah sets forth, then you would have received divine wisdom. Now, this is directly in contrast to the Rambam. Remember, the Rambam specifically stated for many and many occasions, but very specifically stated that Avraham Avinu, right, achieved prophecy and became the forerunner of the Jewish people because he, specifically through logic and contemplation, found God, right? And Rambam in many places states that that the Torah is a path, but it's not the only path. But because rather you can study through science and logic and so on and find the reason, right, of God that way. And that's specifically how we became who we are, because of Avraham Avinu's intellectual contemplation. The Kuzari is saying the exact opposite, right? God's influence is coming down to this earth, so to speak. If you want to tap into it, then you have to live the Torah, right? The Torah is the way, because only through spiritual wisdom that's given by God can we know how to tap into that wisdom and how to connect to it. The only way to know how much, how, where, Bezizman, and what time. So the Kuzari is the Rabbi Yehuda Levi here is telling us that all of these things matter. It's like a magic trick almost. There's the key. You need to know where, what place, and he's going to tell us later that place, of course, is the land of Israel, right? What time? There's certain times of year that you're supposed to be doing certain things. Right? And that's how you tap into the wisdom. So on Pesach, you're supposed to be eating matzah. On Sukkot, you're supposed to be sitting in a sukkah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? In the morning, you're saying Kriya Shema, all those things. Right? And how is it you should do it? And all kinds of things of which we can go on and talk about. It's similar, and he compares it to a person who goes into the pharmacy of a doctor, right? In those days, the doctor was the one who gave out the pharmaceuticals. There wasn't two separate offices. So, but everybody knows this doctor has all kinds of great, wondrous drugs that heal all kinds of things. But Harofe Nedar, but the doctor went on a vacation, and nobody, so he's gone. So there's a house with all kinds of drugs in it, and the doctor is sitting on the beach in the Bahamas drinking a margarita, and there's no internet, so you don't know how to get a hold of the guy, right? So Harofe Nedar, Vahanashim Hayushochrim also, right? Oats are Kedel Hafiktalis, but the sick people are still getting sick, so everybody's going to the place. I guess they break into the building and they're walking around. Okay, what drug do I take for my headache? What do I take for my heartburn? What do I take for my toe? What do I, nobody knows. So Habor, so then some foolish guy, says, hey, I'll give it out. What do you want? A headache here. I took this last week and it helped my nose, so it'll help your head, and so on and so forth. So he's giving them out, right? He has no idea which things are good for what, right? He doesn't know what the dosages are, right? So in the end, what is he doing? He could kill people that way, people that have diseases that they could be dying from, and he gives them the wrong medicine and they die, or he might give them something that's poisonous for them, depending on the situation. So before, the same drugs in the right person in the right dosages healed people, but now they are doing the wrong thing. So imkara shehoil echad mehem, but then every once in a while, some guy is going to get cured, right? So the echad mehem b'mechol bin hamecholim mohem. So nato nashmeil of yamu zehu hamol, and then they're going to say, oh, you see, drug number 624 on the second shelf, that's the one that helps everything, right? And then everyone's going to go. Eventually, they'll realize that the whole thing is a lie, right? Right? They'll see that it's just something that happened by chance. They don't realize that the reasons why they were getting healed by these things before by the doctor was because the doctor knew what to give them. Hishka Osam Korei gave them the right amount. Each gave each person who is ill the appropriate medicines and the appropriate dosages. And also said other things. You don't just take the medicine, but you have to know how much you're supposed to eat, what foods are good for you, how much you're supposed to drink, tirgul, manucha, whether you're supposed to rest, you're supposed to be awake, do you need fresh air, do you need to lie in bed, and so on. So the doctor gives you all kinds of advice, not just the medicine, right? And the same thing, Cain, Joseph, I see you have a hand up, but I want to finish item 79. Right. So this is in the same way people see, right? The same thing people were trying before Moshe Rabbeinu came along, right? Moshe, of course, the one who taught us the Torah. So l'ma'ait ma'atim, lios merumim ayidei ma'archos achukim astrologos v'ativios. People were trying through all kinds of tricks and astrological ways and natural cures to cure all kinds of things. And they would go and bounce. They would go to one place. These are the spiritual laws of this practice and this tribe, and these are this practice and this tribe, and they would try them all out. But everyone was just hodgepodge, seeing what they can do to try to access the spiritual energy that is God, right? From one God to the other God, you get to call out to God number A, then you might get rain, you call it to God number B, and you might get love, and you call it to God number C, and you'll get money, etc., etc. And some of them said, I'll pray to all the gods, and I can get everything. And then at time, they just completely forgot who's really running the show. The one who's really controlling it all. And they were thinking that these things might be helping, even though it's all really chance. When in truth, it was all causing a lot of damage. The truth is that the only thing that's really helping is the godly influence that makes everything run, and the thing that's truly damaging is taking away the godly influence. So by not following the Torah, you take away the godly influence. By following the Torah, you bring it into this world. So there's another remarkable difference that I'm going to point out here between the Rambam and Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, and this is the famous difference between the two. Rabbi Yehuda Halevi immediately runs to Moshe Rabbeinu as the one who brought to us, the idea of God, right? Moshe, of course, being the teacher of Torah, whereas Rambam focuses on Avraham Avinu, and it's not coincidental because remember, Avraham Avinu was prior to the giving of the Torah, and the Rambam was emphasizing how logic and science can lead us to knowledge of God. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is professing a completely different idea, and that is that it's Moshe Rabbeinu, by teaching us the Torah, that teaches us how to access God. And that's the only way. Any other way. And remember, there's also a big difference here between the two and their understanding of what Avodah Zarah is. What, Avodah Zarah, according to Rambam, idol worship was people trying to access God, and then they realize, hey, God is evident through his creations. Maybe we can worship his creations, right? And then eventually they started thinking of the creations themselves as a God. So it started off as a somewhat innocent-ish kind of mistake, ended up as a massive mistake, right? Whereas according to Yehuda Halevi, it was different. They were trying to find God, but had no idea how to do it. They had no direction. We needed God to come at Har Sinai and tell us how. Until then, people were searching and trying to find things. So they're very different understandings as to the origins of religion, each one having different interesting ramifications. I'm going to always be pointing out the differences between Rabbi Yehuda Levi's thinking and the Rambam's thinking. And as we study Rabbi Yehuda Levi, as we go through the Kuzari, we'll understand more and more why these differences that might seem minor in the beginning, why they could have much larger ramifications. And just to give you a little hint, a little preview, when Rabbi Yehuda Levi today said the times, the place, right? Or according to Rabbi Yehuda Levi, the Torah is given. It's almost like a key. It's like a key that fits in a lock. It has little notches, right? That have to be done exactly right. So there's no logic or reason that you and I can perceive that explains why it has to be in those times and places, right? This is a really important idea, right? Those are godly. God told us that on Pesach we're supposed to eat matzah, and that's the key, right? Whereas according to Rambam, he emphasized so much that it's some sort of a key that we need to do to unlock spirituality, but there's a logical reason which, through keeping the mitzvah of matzah, we can come to realization of certain ideas and concepts through which we grow and get closer to God. So they're two very, very different concepts and ideas as to what the purpose of keeping the Torah and doing the mitzvahs are, and they're going to have ramifications as we continue going through this book. Now, I'm sorry, I promised you, Yosef, that I would open the floor, so go ahead.
No problem. First of all, we mentioned it this morning in halacha class, the parable about the medicine, because we're learning about grinding on making medicine on Shabbat. Second, so I'm very excited that I didn't teach it before, I still didn't even put on the video. But the second thing is, Rabbi Korobkin has a translation as a doctor, not a pharmacist.
I don't know, but I'll have to look. It's in 79. He does say doctor, and in the translation I have, it's called a rofe. So in the modern Hebrew translation, the one that I'm using, the Schwartz one, it does refer to him as a rofe, as a doctor. But
when I learned
in those
it in
days, they
high
were kind of one and the same. But anyway,
I'm saying, I think when we learned it in high school, it was explained that it's a pharmacist.
No, that's
the
kind
doctor
of just
can prescribe something, but he doesn't usually make them. So
yeah, that's true today, but that wasn't true back then, I guess. Back then when he went to the doctor, he probably had a cabinet full of goodies to give out. I don't mean lollipop.
Thank you.
But yeah. All right. So these are very, very important ideas. So now, so we're starting to get an idea. So your Yehuda Levi now, just to summarize really quick in one or two sentences, has now he brought the Kuzari to the point where he recognizes that God does interact regularly in this world. He's everywhere, right? And how do we know how to tap into that wisdom? How could it be that we can communicate and understand and hear that wisdom of God? By following the instructions that God gave, because the only way to know God's wisdom is by following the instructions that God gave, which is the Torah, right? And the Torah tells us and taught to us by Moshe Rabbeinu, and that's how we tap into the awareness of God. And now we're getting closer to the answer of where prophecy comes from. So again, a different understanding of prophecy than the Rambam, but an important one and one that we should remember, and that's why we're learning the Kuzari. So now item 80. So now the Kuzari, he's getting closer to understanding this answer. He's going to change the subject again. So Amar Kuzari says the Kuzari, let's get back to the topic, right? And now what he really wants to know is if we go back to the beginning, one of the problems that the Kuzari had all the way in the beginning was, why is it that Islam is all over the place? Millions of people doing it and so on. Christianity all over the place. Millions of people doing it and so on. The Jews, nobody likes them. Nobody cares about them. There's hardly any of them. I'm not going to bother talking to the Jews, right? That's how this whole thing started. So now the Kuzari is going back to himself, his own thinking. All right, so this Jewish stuff is starting to sound interesting to me now. So what's the deal, right? right? Like, tell me a little bit more about Jewish history. Tell me a little bit more about like how this developed. How did Jews become Jews? How did it spread? How did it grow, or how did it not grow? Like, what happened? Okay, so how exactly did your religion come to be? Now, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, of course, is putting this question in the mouth of the Kuzari because he wants to teach us, right, his understanding of how Judaism came to be, right? Remember this, and it's going to be very different from Rambam's understanding, but it's going to be interesting. And he already gave us some hints as to where it's going to go. Right? And how is it that it spread? How did it grow? Right? How did it become accepted? And how is it that even though obviously when Judaism came to be among the Jews, whoever those people were, wherever they were in history, of the Kuzari is not, he's going to get an answer to that question, but wherever that was, there must have been a lot of different people arguing about a lot of different stuff. And certainly knowing Jews, that was the case now and will be the case forever, and certainly was the case back then. So how was it that Judaism all of a sudden became accepted by all you guys, right? Even though Uvameshach Kamazman, and then how long did it take for his Basas Hadas, for that religion to become established? Until it became completed and understood and a complete entity of a whole coherent religion. Shariat Cholosan Shel Ha'edot Hadatiyos, right? The beginnings of most of all of the religious communities, they usually start with an individual. Some guy gets up and says, I'm going to found this religion, right? And he's obviously thinking about Jesus and Muhammad, right? Right? A person gets up and says, I'm starting XYZ religion, right? Christianity in his case, Islam in his case, right? And Messiah right? They there's individuals that they have in their original parties that they talk and discuss about how to promulgate these ideas in this religion. Right? Sometimes they spread through convincing each other and through proselytization and so on. Sometimes they might have a king who takes on their idea, and that forces people. And he's obviously thinking about Constantine in the time of the Roman Empire, who decided, okay, I'm adopting Christianity, and now the whole Rome is Christian, right? And say, I don't know exactly what happened with Islam. I'm not super familiar, but certainly there was a lot of forcing people to join Islam by the followers of Muhammad. So clearly there's a guy who gets up, he has certain ideas, right? And then he talks to a certain group of friends and convinces them that these ideas are compelling. And then they go about spreading their religion, whether it's through violence or through convincing. But either way, they go about spreading religion. So how did your religion go, right? Rabbi Yehuda Halevi asked this question obviously because he was itching to give his answer and understanding to this question, right? Right? He really wanted to get down to this. And this is probably one of the most famous of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi's arguments he's going to present now. Right? But he says, Amar Chaver, so the rabbi answered, B'derech zos tzomchos rak ma'archos ha'chukim ha'sichlios. That's true only for ideas and religions which people made up in their minds, right? Which people came up with on their own, right? Asher tchilasam min ha'adam. If it was started by humans, then humans spread it through that natural process that you just described. Sometimes one of those ideas becomes accepted and it merits success. It becomes successful. And once it becomes successful and they see it spreading, they see, God supports us, right? Right? Because remember, in those days, one of the primary arguments of both Christianity and Islam against Judaism was, look at us. The millions and millions of people believe in us and what we believe in. And you guys are a couple of straggling few and struggling to survive. Obviously God agrees with us, not with you, right? So once it starts to spread, God is on our side. shehi pri hashra uchedomen. So that's the reason why we're successful is because God is with us. But if you have a religion that starts from God, not from people, right? Then it can just appear. You can have a large group of people that are given this idea by God, and poof, now they have this religion that they believe in. Namar lo hayi, right? Vihini yasa kimobrias olam. It can say, just like creation of the world, the entire universe happened because God said, "Let there be a world," and poof, there's an entire universe, right? The same thing if God decides that there should be a religion called Judaism, and he tells Moshe Rabbeinu to tell us all about it at Sinai. Poof, Sinai's over. Now there's a new religion, and 600,000 men, 3 million people approximately, give or take a few, right, have now accepted a new religion, right? So that's how this religion started. So Amar Kuzari, so the Kuzari said, and I'm reading number 82, right? Hivhalta osana, Chaver, you're blowing me away, right? Right? This is crazy stuff, right? I mean, this is a pretty dramatic claim you're making here, Rabbi. I think you better back it up a bit. So the Chaver, the rabbi, next week is going to tell us the drama. He's going to admit, yeah, it's a dramatic claim, but he's going to go through the drama of the Exodus and so on. That's going to be the demonstration of how it could be that when it comes from God, it can come like one big, giant, I don't know, revelation. What?
Revelation.
Yeah,
Revelation.
Yeah, and how the world can and a new religion can be born. So it's a very, very different type of spread, a very different type of success in terms of a world religion, according to the Kuzari, than the two other religions that the Kuzari was familiar with, Christianity and Islam. All right, so this is, I guess, a good stopping point. We'll start next week, Leonetta, from 83. It gives a couple minutes for questions, answers, comments, whatever. Fire away.
So is he just not thinking that it's a religion before Moses, that Abraham, I mean, what was he thinking? Because it didn't.
Yeah, that's a good question. He's going to say there were a few Yechidim, a few individuals that understood Torah, or at least basic Torah principles, over the generations that passed it down one to another. So obviously the patriarchs, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And so he's going to follow from Shem, the son of Noach, through the lineage that's recorded in the Torah, all the way from Shem to Avraham, and then Avram all the way to Moshe, right? Of a few individuals that held true and knew this religious idea, but that it ultimately became revealed as a communal religion at the time of Har Sinai. But it's a very good question. He will address that.
All the people in Egypt that were, slaves, they were just.
Yeah, no, you're hitting on exactly. He's going to discuss the whole issue of how they lived in Egypt as slaves and how that affected this. We're going to discuss that a lot next week.
Okay.
Does he have to rely on the fact that Yaakov went to a yeshiva, as I recall, our tradition teaches?
I don't remember if he says that specifically, but it's the same idea. It's the idea that the Avos and those few individuals were exposed to this knowledge.
Somehow.
Whether they went to a yeshiva, so to speak, and sat by a stender and argued about the Rashba and the Ramban is a different story. But there was some form of knowledge that was passed, according to the Kuzari, which is based, of course, on rabbinic traditions, and when I'm sorry, I sometimes interchangeably say the word the Kuzari when I'm referring to Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, but when in these conversations, that's usually what I mean. But when we're actually studying the book, the Kuzari refers to the Chazar King. I'm sorry that it's confusing. I'll try to say Rabbi Yehuda Halevi instead of Kuzari from now on, so I don't get into that confusion. Any other comments, questions? We had some new people with us today, so I'm very happy to see all of you, and some veterans. And by the way, if you look on my YouTube channel, I did start a series in Zohar.
Oh,
Okay. So if I simply cannot commit to a time, so I didn't make it a lecture like on a Wednesday or a Thursday, because I just can't commit. But if there are people that are interested, send me like a text message telling me, and I could make a list, and I could try to text out when I do it. But I'm warning you, sometimes it might be 4 o'clock in the morning when I'm bored at the hospital. So I just don't know when it's going to be. So that's the only way I can do these things. It's on my own time. So, but I could do like live streaming, or like we do this in the Zoom class. But I did so far 2 lectures in Zohar, and and I want, my focus is to show that Zohar is coming from a similar time, the same time period that Rambam wrote and Rabbi Levi wrote. I mean, give or take 100 years here and there, but all coming out of the golden age of Spain. And all 3 were very, very different approaches to what Judaism is. Very different. And all 3 had profound influence on the way we think Judaism is, the way we live it, the way we believe it, the way we don't believe it, whatever it is today. All 3 had a profound influence. I'm purposely not teaching it from a Lurianic perspective, which those of you that might have dabbled in the various places to learn Kabbalah nowadays, you may have dabbled in it a little bit. Nowadays, everybody teaches it from a different way. This is not the place to talk about it now, but I'm simply reading the Zohar and teaching the ideas that the Zohar expresses and showing how it gives birth to an entirely different understanding of what our religion is.
is there a particular text that you're using for purposes of your
The Zohar. Yeah, I'm just reading the Zohar. That's it.
That'll be enough.
Yeah. I have a couple translations in front of me that I draw from here and there, but for the most part, it's me.
Is it possible for you to let us know when you put that on YouTube so we can at our leisure?
Well, you can always look on YouTube and you'll see.
Just send
Your name and the
send
Zohar.
us the links and
Yeah, text me. Whoever's interested. I don't want to throw it out. If you're not interested, fine. But if you're interested,
Okay.
send me like a message or an email or something, and I'll put together either a WhatsApp group or a text message group, and then I can text out whenever I post one. I can text a link, and whenever I'm about to do one, if you want, I can text out an invitation to join me.
Okay, but
Also, if we subscribe to your channel, then we get a notification when a new video was uploaded.
Yeah, if you do subscribe to my channel,
really?
then yes, then you should. Whenever I upload one, you should see it.
How do you subscribe to a channel? Just
Get on YouTube, search for. I'm going to stop the recording. Hold on. Sorry.
No, I know. Okay, so I put your name in and Zohar.